The 10,118th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in the Middle East. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Cyprus, Israel, Lebanon, and the Syrian Arab Republic to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the following briefers to participate in this meeting. Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs. Good morning. Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Undersecretary General for Peace Operations. Mr. Tom Fletcher, Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator. And Ms. Lynn Harfouche, Executive Committee Member of the Lebanese National Bloc Party. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo. Thank you. Good morning.
Mr. President, amid an already devastating escalation in the Middle East, the decision by Hezbollah to attack Israel on 2 March has again drawn Lebanon into a conflict it neither sought nor can afford. In violation of Security Council Resolution 1701, Hezbollah has since fired hundreds of projectiles, including rockets, missiles, and drones, from Lebanon into Israel and the occupied Syrian Golan. It has also warned those living south of the Blue Line to evacuate. Israel, in turn, has carried out extensive strikes in southern Beirut, across southern Lebanon, and in the Bekaa and Baalbek regions. These operations have reportedly killed over 570 people and left over 1,400 injured, according to the Lebanese government. Israel has also issued evacuation notices for these areas, triggering the displacement of over 500,000 people and creating yet another acute humanitarian emergency. Undersecretary General Tom Fletcher will brief you in more detail in this regard. The renewed violence across the Blue Line has largely erased the progress achieved in recent months to consolidate the cessation of hostilities. It also jeopardizes Lebanon's tradition of coexistence as fear and uncertainty heighten their intercommunal tensions. As the Secretary General previously reported, although the cessation of hostilities reached in November 2024 did not completely end the preceding violence, it brought substantial respite. Following the cessation of hostilities, the State of Lebanon also took historic and courageous steps to fulfill its obligations under Resolutions 1701 and 1559. In August, the government tasked the Lebanese Armed Forces with developing a plan to establish exclusive state control over weapons. And in January, the Lebanese Armed Forces announced that they had assumed operational control over the South Litani sector. Furthermore, civilian representatives from both parties participated in 2 meetings of the cessation of hostilities mechanism in December, a modest but meaningful step toward dialogue. Nevertheless, significant challenges persisted. Hezbollah refused to cooperate with the government's efforts to extend state authority throughout Lebanon and establish a monopoly over the possession and use of arms. Meanwhile, the Israel Defense Forces maintained positions north of the Blue Line at 5 locations and 2 so-called buffer zones, while also conducting near-daily strikes on alleged Hezbollah and other non-state armed groups in Lebanon. Still, The progress achieved since November 2024 underscores the fact that security and stability for the people of Lebanon and Israel are attainable. It is vital to build on these advances, not squander them. It was therefore encouraging that on 9 March, President Aoun affirmed Lebanon's readiness to engage in direct negotiations with Israel under international auspices, with the aim of achieving a complete truce. He also proposed that the Lebanese armed forces, upon receiving urgent logistical support, would immediately take control of areas of tensions, confiscating all weapons and dismantling Hezbollah infrastructure. Prime Minister Salam has likewise reiterated Lebanon's commitment to achieving a state monopoly on arms. On 2 March, in condemning Hezbollah's actions, he affirmed the government's complete rejection of any military activity outside the scope of legitimate state institutions and reaffirmed the state's full authority over war and peace decisions. In a landmark statement, he announced the cabinet's decision prohibiting Hezbollah's military and security activities and mandating the immediate handover of weapons, tasking the Lebanese state security forces with the enforcement of this decision. These declarations have been accompanied by concrete measures. The Lebanese army has reported the detention of approximately 26 Lebanese nationals, including Hezbollah members, and 1 Palestinian, all for the illegal possession of weapons and ammunition. Judicial rulings have been passed down against some of the Hezbollah members arrested. Separately, on 5 March, the Lebanese government declared a ban on the activities of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in Lebanon and revoked visa-free entry for Iranian citizens. Mr. President, while more hard work will prove critical, such statements and actions are significant. They reflect a clear resolve of the Lebanese state, and they warrant the full support of this Council. The United Nations remains firmly committed to assisting all parties in meeting their responsibilities. To enable Lebanon to fulfill its obligations under Resolutions 1559 and 1701, an immediate de-escalation and cessation of violence is imperative. Hezbollah must cease its attacks on Israel and cooperate with the government's efforts to assert full state authority and establish a monopoly over weapons. Israel must halt its military campaign in Lebanon and withdraw its forces from Lebanese territory. The sovereignty and territorial integrity of both Lebanon and Israel must be upheld. All parties must respect their obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law. Civilians and civilian infrastructure must never be targeted. United Nations personnel must be protected. And the international community must scale up its support to the Lebanese state security services, particularly the Lebanese armed forces, to ensure they have the capacity and resources they critically require. The Secretary General continues to engage with member states to press for an end to this conflict. The Special Coordinator for Lebanon has been in contact with all relevant actors, including through a visit to Israel earlier this week, to advocate urgently for de-escalation and dialogue. As Undersecretary General Lacroix will report, UNIFIL peacekeepers remain in position along the Blue Line, often at great risk. To prevent further loss of life and to create the space for meaningful political engagement, violence must stop. Only then can the parties resume the difficult but indispensable work of building a stable and secure future for both Lebanon and Israel. We will continue to work closely with all concerned to restore calm and protect civilians. Our objective is straightforward: a return to a situation in which commitments under Resolutions 1559 and 1701 can be pursued in a credible and sustainable manner. This is a moment that requires restraint, responsibility, and a willingness to prioritize the well-being of the populations who bear the brunt of these hostilities. The United Nations stands ready to assist, but the decisions that shape the coming days must be guided by a collective recognition that further escalation benefits no one. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing. I now give the floor to Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, members of the Security Council. As you just heard from Under Secretary General DiCarlo, the fragile situation that prevails since November 2024 has given way to a significant and dangerous escalation of hostilities. We are gravely concerned that there will be a further worsening of the situation in Lebanon and in the region. In this dangerous and precarious environment, UNIFIL remains on the ground, implementing its mandate as far as the security circumstances allow. Since the 2nd of March, when Hezbollah claimed responsibility for an attack on Israel, the group has carried out daily strikes across the Blue Line, including with rockets, missiles, and drones at targets in Israel and the occupied Syrian Golan. Many rockets have been launched from south of the Litani River, which demonstrates the presence of unauthorized armed personnel, assets, and weapons south of the Litani River, in clear violation of Resolution 1701. The Israel Defense Forces have issued displacement orders for the entire UNIFIL area of operations and intensified daily strikes, impacting multiple locations in the UNIFIL area of operations, also in violation of Resolution 1701. Since the 1st of March, UNIFIL has reported some 4,120 trajectories, including 2,733 from south to north of the Blue Line and 323 air attacks by the Israel Defense Forces. In the same period, UNIFIL has recorded 1,387 trajectories from north to south. Notably, each trajectory may represent multiple projectiles, and UNIFIL cannot detect some projectiles, such as those fired by portable anti-tank launchers or light weapons. On the 9th of March alone, UNIFIL recorded 159 air violations, the highest number observed in a 24-hour period since the resumption of hostilities. The Israel Defense Forces have also reinforced the 5 positions at which they have maintained a presence north of the Blue Line. UNIFIL has observed incursion by the Israeli Defense Forces units into Lebanon at several locations, including through Yaroun in Sector West and Hula, Khiam, and Markaba in Sector East. On the 9th of March, one Israel Defense Forces tank was observed near Kunin in southeast Lebanon, 7 kilometers north of the Blue Line. Direct clashes between Hezbollah and Israeli Defense Forces inside Lebanon have been reported, including in Hula and Khiam on the 4th of March. Extensive buildup of Israeli military assets south of the Blue Line also continues to be reported. There have been several incidents that have jeopardized the safety and security of our peacekeepers. On the 6th of March, peacekeepers from the Ghanaian contingent were severely injured inside their base in Al-Kawza, Sector West. He is currently being treated at a hospital in Beirut and is now in a serious but stable condition. Several other peacekeepers were injured less seriously, while the base was heavily damaged in the resulting fires. We obviously wish a speedy recovery to all involved. A UNIFIL investigation is ongoing, including to determine the origin of the projectiles or munitions that impact the UN position. On the 7th of March, an Israel Defense Forces tank stopped in front of a UNIFIL observation post near Markaba in Sector East. Subsequently, the peacekeepers heard multiple rounds of small arms fire, and 2 of the post's perimeter lights were damaged. On the 8th of March, 2 loud explosions were heard near a UNIFIL headquarters in Nakura. Debris consistent with a drone or a rocket, as well as remnants of an Iron Dome interception, fell inside the UNIFIL camp. No injuries were reported. Mr. President, our peacekeepers have remained in position in line with the mandate this Council has provided, while continuously reassessing the force's posture against prevailing risks. UNIFIL continues to maintain constant contact with the parties to avoid misunderstandings, deconflict, and de-escalate where possible. All parties bear a clear and unequivocal responsibility to ensure the safety and security of UN peacekeepers. We call on all actors on the ground to uphold this obligation and to refrain from any action that endangers UNIFIL peacekeepers. With the ongoing exchanges of fire severely restricting their movements, UNIFIL's current focus includes ensuring safety of its personnel and helping facilitate humanitarian access to affected communities in the area. UNIFIL has supported the local community in line with its protection of civilians mandate, transporting dozens of civilians to safety from several villages in southern Lebanon, including children, older persons, and persons with disabilities, in close coordination with local authorities. On the 7th of March, UNIFIL assisted in evacuating 3 families from Sarda in Sector East. On the 10th of March, at the request of the municipality of Alma al-Shab in Sector West, UNIFIL facilitated the safe movement of around 80 civilians who wished to leave the area. Peacekeepers have largely been confined to their bases, with some spending significant periods of time in shelter, which seriously impedes UNIFIL's freedom of movement and limits the mission's monitoring and reporting ability. Troop rotations are currently suspended. This security environment has also presented challenges for the resupply of fuel, food, and water for UN positions. Roadblocks erected by the Israel Defense Forces have restricted access to a number of our positions. The UNIFIL head of mission and force commander, General Abanyara, is coordinating closely with the Special Coordinator for Lebanon, who is the designated official for security for all United Nations personnel in Lebanon. Program Essential UNIFIL civilian personnel have been moved to reside in UNIFIL headquarters at Nakura. Other international civilian personnel are relocating out of the South Litani sector, in some cases out of Lebanon. The mission is assisting our national colleagues who wish to relocate to the North Litani sector. Mr. President, the Lebanese armed forces had made significant efforts since the cessation of hostilities in November 2024, steadily reinforcing their presence in the south and progressively extending their deployment along the Blue Line. We commend these efforts, which represented an important step towards the full implementation of Resolution 1701. However, in the face of the current hostilities, the Lebanese armed forces have had to temporarily relocate some 20 kilometers north of the Blue Line. Mr. President, as noted by Under-Secretary General DiCarlo, and as you will hear in more detail from Under-Secretary General Tom Fletcher, the heavy exchanges of fire have most tragically had the greatest impact on civilians on both sides of the Blue Line, with many casualties and hundreds of thousands displaced in Lebanon. In southern Lebanon, the humanitarian situation continues to worsen, with IDP shelters reporting near full occupancy and lacking means to meet basic needs. UNIFIL's liaison and coordination team has continued its close engagement with the Lebanese armed forces and Israel Defense Forces, seeking to de-escalate and facilitate humanitarian missions. In the past week, UNIFIL has facilitated dozens of missions by the Lebanese Red Cross. In the interest of the safety of both peacekeepers and civilians, we urge the parties to commit to active deconfliction through this channel. To those member states contributing troops to UNIFIL, we extend our most sincere gratitude. The continued united commitment of the troop contributing countries, as well as the support of this Council, is crucial. I express solidarity with and pride in the men and women of UNIFIL, again on the front lines. Only a political solution will bring lasting stability to Lebanon and the region. We urge all parties to recommit to the full implementation of Resolution 1701 and to engage constructively toward that end. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Mr. Lacroix for his briefing, and I now give the floor to Mr. Tom Fletcher.
Mr. President, Ambassador Bartos, Excellencies, this is a moment of grave peril for Lebanon and for the region, for all of us. Too many warning lights are flashing. Actions have consequences. Lebanon's particular place on the map and in history means that tremors in geopolitics ricochet through it like earthquakes. So when the world turns away from international law and human solidarity, Lebanon shakes. When the world pulls apart, when the splintering of the international order is cheered on by those who believe the rules do not apply to them, or that they can take risks with the lives of others, when leaders feel unrestrained and the rules are in retreat, when the gains of decades are precarious, when technology and killing form an increasingly deadly alliance, and when the scaffolding for coexistence is under sustained, deliberate attack, then Lebanon shakes. As a result of the region's latest war, and following months of violence, we've watched the humanitarian crisis in Lebanon intensify with alarming speed, with civilians on both sides of the blue line once again paying the heaviest price. Casualties continue to mount. Over 570 people reported killed, over 1,400 injured since the 2nd of March. Mass displacement is accelerating, with over 750,000 people now registered with the government of Lebanon as on the move. In addition, almost 84,000 Syrians and more than 8,000 Lebanese have crossed into Syria since the 2nd of March. We're seeing large-scale movements into densely populated urban areas where shelter capacity is already overstretched. More than 120,000 people, including thousands of children, are now in 580 collective centers. And as you heard earlier, these sites are overcrowded, with inadequate sanitation, insufficient essential supplies. These conditions heighten risks of harassment, sexual violence, exploitation, abuse, trafficking, particularly, of course, for women and girls. The people of Lebanon have, of course, already endured extensive displacement and damage to homes and livelihoods, infrastructure, and essential public services during the 2023 to 24 escalation, compounding the impact of the financial and economic collapse experienced since 2019. At the same time, the escalation is pushing an already fragile education system deeper into crisis. Schools have been forced to close to serve as temporary shelters, disrupting learning for tens of thousands of children. Overcrowded shelters are also raising the risk of disease, while psychosocial trauma, an acute aspect of this crisis since the 2024 escalation, is being compounded. As these health needs rise, hostilities have forced the closure of 49 primary healthcare centers and 5 hospitals in the south and in Beirut's southern suburbs. Since 28th of February, the World Health Organization has recorded 25 attacks on healthcare, resulting in 16 deaths and 29 injuries among health workers and patients. The protection of healthcare is paramount. Mr. President, the United Nations and the broader humanitarian community are fully mobilized to complement government-led efforts. Along with local organizations and women-led groups, we will do all we can to reach those most in need. We and our partners have provided over 500,000 hot meals, distributed over 270,000 liters of bottled water, provided hygiene items and household supplies, and 123,000 liters of fuel to sustain critical services. Our rapid response teams are delivering life-saving supplies in shelters. 125 health sector-supported mobile primary healthcare units are providing services too. Child protection, psychosocial support are also being expanded, alongside preparations for emergency cash assistance for vulnerable children and families. In close coordination with the government of Lebanon, a 3-month hyper-prioritized flash appeal will be launched in Beirut later this week. This emergency scale-up comes on top of existing humanitarian programs under the 2026 Lebanon Response Plan. I will support these efforts with a rapid response allocation of $15 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund to help scale up life-saving work. Additional funds will be released through a reserve allocation from the Lebanon Humanitarian Fund. But our ability to reach people is tightening by the day. Large areas of South Lebanon, the Bekaa, and Beirut's southern suburbs remain active conflict zones. Debris and unexploded ordnance are blocking roads to affected villages, and key transport routes, including those linking the Bekaa, have been repeatedly disrupted. Population movements are shifting quickly and increasingly difficult to track. Of course, Lebanon's latest humanitarian crisis is just one more consequence of a regional war that is spiraling out of control. War does not stay neatly within borders. It tears through markets, supply chains, food prices. And when that happens, the most vulnerable people in Lebanon and across the region are hit first and hardest. When maritime corridors such as the Strait of Hormuz are disrupted, food, health, energy become more expensive and harder to access. Impact on food security is already evident in Gaza, where the price of flour is up by 270%. Global shipping costs have increased 16% compared to this time last year. We anticipate delays of 6 months in the delivery of supplies across multiple humanitarian responses. Airspace closures are also disrupting our humanitarian missions across.
Allow me to begin by thanking the United States, the presidents of this council, for convening this meeting on such a short notice. And Latvia also joined the call for this meeting to take place. I thank the USG DiCarlo, USG Fletcher, and USG Lacroix for their briefings. And I also thank Ms. Lynn Harfouch for her insights. The current escalation in Lebanon has serious consequences for the civilian populations and for the security of UN peacekeepers, as well as the stability of the region and global security. And we commend the exceptional service of UNIFIL as it continues to carry out its mandate under Resolution 1701, monitoring this conflict even in the direst circumstances. All essential personnel, including those from my country, are still remaining in place in the midst of hostilities. Mr. President, Hezbollah has chosen to attack Israel in support of Iran and has dragged the people of Lebanon into a conflict they have no part in. And it brings more suffering to the civilian population and endangers the fragile progress of the Lebanese government attempting to assert state control over its territory. Hezbollah's escalation is part of the pattern, as Iran consistently uses proxy networks to destabilize Middle East, attacks countries in the region, and enables aggression in Europe. And it must stop now. Hezbollah must immediately disarm and stop all actions against Israel, but we commend the Lebanese government's decision of 2nd March to declare all Hezbollah military and security activities illegal in the whole territory of Lebanon. As Lebanon's Prime Minister, Nawaf Salam, has warned of a looming humanitarian crisis, and we heard also from our briefers, with more than 700 persons forcibly displaced and more than 870 people lacking basic supplies. We strongly reiterate the vital need for all sides to respect international humanitarian law. With over 500 people killed, we call on all parties to ensure adherence to principles of proportionality and distinction of civilian objects. Well, we recognize
no right to unilaterally drag the Lebanese people into misery and despair. The Lebanese state is the sole legitimate authority which can conduct military operations and define Lebanon's foreign relations. Hezbollah must disarm immediately and stop all actions against Israel. In the midst of these developments, we welcome and commend the decision of the Lebanese Council of Ministers to ban Hezbollah's military activities. The resolve of the Lebanese leadership to extend its exclusive control over arms is clear. It should be given a chance to bring security and prosperity to Lebanon. We should all be standing by their side. Its steadfast commitment did not falter in the face of developments. Instead, it seems to have been strengthened. We reaffirm our support for the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and political independence of Lebanon. Lebanese sovereignty must be fully respected, and civilians must be protected in accordance with international law. Mr. President, as the spiral of escalation accelerates, we call for maximum restraint and the protection of civilians and infrastructure. Restraint can be a virtue in times of crisis, and indicative of strength and resolve, not weakness. As the Greek Prime Minister said in his telephone conversations with the leaders of Israel and Lebanon, Greece recognizes the right of Israel to defend itself according to international law. However, further escalation must be avoided, similar to the undertaking of prolonged large-scale military operations in the Lebanese south, which risks plunging the region in more instability and conflict. Full respect of Security Council Resolution 1701 and the ceasefire agreement of 2024 is a prerequisite for stability. As our briefers described, Lebanon is faced with a profound humanitarian challenge. More than 700,000 civilians have been displaced, while dozens are dead and injured, and children are caught in the midst of this chaos. The risk of instability spilling over to the broader region in the form of extensive refugee flows is all too real. According to the International Organization for Migration, some 50,000 Syrians left Lebanon for Syria in the past week alone. Greece is participating in international humanitarian efforts in support of Lebanon and its reconstruction. We stand ready to participate in the conference in support of the Lebanese armed forces in Paris, spearheaded by France and Saudi Arabia, when it takes place. We also continue to assist Lebanon in its efforts to forge strong state institutions, including the LAF. It is a pledge made by the Greek Prime Minister to President Aoun, which has already produced concrete results. These include the recently procured defense material to the Lebanese armed forces to enhance their capabilities. We are committed to continuing our support to the Lebanese armed forces. At the same time, also, in line with the latest communication between our Prime Minister and President Aoun, we remain in constant contact with the competent Lebanese authorities. We are finalizing our contribution to address the grave humanitarian crisis on the ground. Mr. President, Greece condemns the incident resulting in the injury of 3 UNIFIL Ghanaian peacekeepers amidst heavy firing. The safety and security of UN personnel and property must be respected at all times. We call on parties to engage constructively through dialogue and diplomacy, potentially turning a crisis into an opportunity for long-term peaceful coexistence in the region. In this context, we welcome the Lebanese leadership's openness to engage diplomatically with Israel towards a peaceful settlement. In conclusion, as the Greek Prime Minister stated alongside the French and Cypriot presidents in the Republic of Cyprus yesterday, Lebanon, which we fully support, merits a better future, certainly one beyond the plans and purposes of other outside forces. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for the statement, and I now
things on their heads and misportray what is happening. It is the American and Israeli military escapade that is plunging the overall region ever deeper into chaos, taking an ever-rising number of human lives and causing irreversible damage to civilian infrastructure. Serious consequences are already being felt by many Middle Eastern countries that we count among our friends. Unfortunately, Lebanon is no exception to this. It has once again suffered large-scale attacks from Israel. It is telling that even before the current escalation, Israeli leadership had repeatedly and openly threatened Lebanon with a renewal of large-scale military action. Judging by the public statements by representative of the General Staff of the IDF, plans to clear the Lebanese territory had long been in the making. At the same time, the Israelis have been repeatedly violating the agreements of 2024 that were reached with the mediation of the U.S. and France when it comes to withdrawing their contingents to the south of the Blue Line, as well as when it comes to stopping arbitrary attacks and strikes on Lebanon. President, we'd like to emphasize that we have always shared and continue to understand the legitimate concerns of our Israeli partners when it comes to the security of their country. We understand the motivations that caused West Jerusalem to begin their military operation against Lebanon. The military action of March 2nd against Israel and subsequent missile and drone attacks on the central region of Israel could, of course, only lead to extreme alarm and concern. At the same time, we believe that the IDF's response over the past 10 days was disproportionate and excessive. As seen in regular reports from the UN Secretariat, the Israelis are ignoring norms of international humanitarian law, conducting strikes against civilian targets inter alia, which have led to many casualties among the civilian population. Over the past 4 days alone, the Israeli armed forces have attacked more than 60 towns. The disproportionate response of West Jerusalem is clearly demonstrated by the number of casualties of the creeping Israeli invasion. According to the Lebanese Ministry of Health, since March 2nd, about 500 people have died, including 80 children, and the number of wounded is in the hundreds. At the same time, on a near daily basis, the Israeli command is publishing evacuation warnings for densely populated regions of Lebanon, including the southern and capital suburbs, leading to mass panic among local residents. Hundreds of thousands of people have been forced to flee their homes and seek shelter. The number of IDPs is estimated at 400 to 800,000 people, which, given the dire socioeconomic situation of Lebanon, will inevitably lead to problems with meeting basic needs, including access to food. President, the continued escalation, besides the dire humanitarian consequences, is jeopardizing the protection and integrity of cultural heritage in Lebanon. During the previous Israeli military campaign, we witnessed the serious damage done to historic monuments of the Arab Republic, including sites in Baalbek and Tyre, which were on the UNESCO World Heritage List. The current Israeli operation has directly affected the Russian Culture House in the city of Nabatea, which is operating jointly with the Russian Development Aid Agency. On March 8th, after a targeted missile strike, the 5-story building of the Russian Culture House was destroyed. We strongly condemn this attack. We view it as an act of military aggression against an institution that was acting solely for humanitarian educational purposes. Lebanese children have long attended classes in that house. No military activities were carried out there. We once again warn that indiscriminate attacks on civilian targets and diplomatic missions in Lebanon are unacceptable. On March 8th, 4 employees of the Iranian embassy in Beirut were killed, and yesterday the Russian general consulate in Isfahan was struck. This is unacceptable. In addition, attacks on personnel of UNIFIL deployed in the south of the country are unacceptable. In this context, we join the position of the Secretary General of the UN, who on March 6th condemned an incident involving a UNIFIL contingent, as a result of which 3 Ghanaian peacekeepers were wounded. We wish them a speedy recovery and call for unconditional guarantees of the safety of peacekeepers. President, in the current explosive environment, we call on West Jerusalem to refrain from using force in its interactions with Lebanon and to return to upholding its international legal obligations, including under Resolution 1701 of the Security Council. Instead of its destructive, confrontation-oriented policy, it is high time for the Israeli leadership to listen to the position of Beirut, which favors immediate de-escalation and is prepared for direct negotiations with Israel. Equally important in this context is the decision of the Lebanese government itself to strengthen state institutions and to establish control over all parts of the country. For our part, we reiterate our unchanged support for the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Lebanon, as well as the mandate of UNIFIL in accordance with the relevant SC resolutions. We believe that there's no alternative to immediately ceasing hostilities, returning to political and humanitarian efforts, and taking real steps to prevent a broader war in the Middle East. We believe that diplomatic efforts have not yet been exhausted. The parties ought to show political will and to refrain from further violence. These were our aims in preparing the Russian draft resolution of the Security Council on the escalation in the Middle East, distributed a few days ago, which will be examined today in the Council. Our document, unlike the text promoted by our colleagues from Bahrain, is non-confrontational in nature and takes into account the regional dimension of current events, including the suffering of the region.
First, an immediate ceasefire must be promoted to end the fighting. Recently, Hezbollah and Israel has continued to exchange fire. Israel has launched intense attacks on towns in southern Lebanon and on Beirut, expanding its military control over southern Lebanon. These attacks have already resulted in the deaths of more than 570 people, including a large number of women and children. We have noted that Iran's letter to the Security Council stating that 4 Iranian diplomats were killed in the attack. The protection of civilians' armed conflict is a red line under international law. China condemns any attacks against civilians and diplomatic personnel. We call on all parties to cease hostilities, promote de-escalation, and fulfill their obligations under international law, in particular international humanitarian law. Israel should immediately withdraw its troops from Lebanon. We welcome the positive statement by the Lebanese government expressing its commitment to ending the conflict and support safeguarding Lebanon's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity. Second, Lebanon should be supported in stabilizing its domestic situation. The heavy shelling has dealt a severe blow to Lebanon's security and stability. More than 700,000 people have been displaced, and already difficult humanitarian situation has further deteriorated. The international community should increase assistance to Lebanon and support the Lebanese government in stabilizing domestic situation and ensuring the basic livelihood of the people. We have taken note of the decision by the Lebanese parliament to extend its term. We welcome the efforts of the Lebanese government to strengthen governance over the country and hope that all parties in Lebanon will actively engage in political dialogue and properly resolve the differences. Third, the safety of UNIFIL personnel must be effectively ensured. On March the 6th, an attack against UNIFIL injured 3 peacekeepers. China strongly condemns the attack and expresses its sympathies to the injured. Any deliberate attack on UN's peacekeepers constitutes a serious violation of international humanitarian law and Security Council Resolution 1701 and must be firmly opposed and held accountable. The current tensions once again highlights the important role of UNIFIL. China urges all parties to ensure the safety and freedom of movement of UNIFIL personnel so that the mission can
integrity of the Lebanese Republic. We support efforts to extend Lebanese state authority over all its territory, thereby strengthening its constitutional institutions, preserving security and stability, and fulfilling the aspirations of its brotherly people for a free and dignified life, development, and prosperity. Bahrain also emphasizes the importance of sparing Lebanon the repercussions of regional escalation and rejects any attempts to drag it into ongoing regional conflicts. We welcome the decision of the Lebanese Council of Ministers on March 2, 2026, regarding the immediate ban on all security and military activities of Hezbollah and restricting its activities to political and legal work. in addition to the start of the second phase of the plan to impose the monopoly of the Lebanese state and its legitimate institutions on weapons, particularly the Lebanese army and official security forces. We stress that this step is an important development and a sine qua non to promote the sovereignty of the Lebanese state and strengthen its institutions in line with the Lebanese constitution and relevant international resolutions, especially Security Council Resolution 1701 and the Ta'if Agreement. This promotes and strengthens internal stability and promotes the Lebanese state's ability to fulfill its national responsibilities and maintain Lebanon's security and stability. The Kingdom of Bahrain also welcomes the call by His Excellency, the Lebanese President Joseph Aoun, to hold direct negotiations with Israel under international auspices to reach an immediate ceasefire in Lebanon. Mr. President, the Kingdom of Bahrain is following with concern the violations of the ceasefire agreement signed between Lebanon and Israel in November 2014, as documented by the UNIFIL. The attacks by Hezbollah on Israel have led to the military escalation in Lebanon, resulting in the displacement of civilians and a worsening of the humanitarian situation. This could have repercussions extending to neighboring countries, further straining their resources and stability. In this context, we stress the need for all parties to adhere to the ceasefire agreement and refrain from any actions that undermine it. We stress that the protection of civilians and the alleviation of human suffering must remain at the heart of joint collaborative efforts. We also emphasize that the safety and security of UN peacekeeping forces is a legal and moral obligation for all parties, and that any attack against them is a clear violation of relevant Security Council resolutions. At the same time, we stress that any gradual withdrawal of UNIFIL forces should be done in a coordinated and responsible manner, ensuring that a security vacuum does not arise in southern Lebanon and that stability is maintained in light of the delicate circumstances in the region. Mr. President, empowering the Lebanese army and strengthening its capabilities is a fundamental pillar for Lebanon's stability and security. We therefore emphasize the importance of providing the necessary support to the Lebanese armed forces to effectively deploy in southern Lebanon and carry out its mandate in preserving Lebanon's sovereignty, security, and stability. We also welcome the French initiative to hold an international conference to support the Lebanese armed forces and internal security forces in April 2026. We also appreciate the efforts of the Lebanese Quintet Committee, namely the United States, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the State of Qatar, the Arab Republic of Egypt, and the French Republic in providing political, economic, and security support to Lebanon during this phase. In conclusion, the Kingdom of Bahrain reiterates that the stability and sovereignty of Lebanon represent a shared regional and international interest. We call upon all parties to adhere to the relevant international resolutions, respect the ceasefire agreement, and spare Lebanon and the region further escalation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Panama is grateful for the convening of this briefing and also for the information shared by the briefers about the developing situation in Lebanon. We extend our greetings to the representatives of the countries that honor us with their participation. Although in November 2024, a cessation of hostilities was reached, incidents and violations along the Blue Line have continued to be recorded since then, which shows the persistent lack of political will that would be needed to create the conditions conducive to peace. Leaderships that sustain themselves through a logic of permanent confrontation end up dragging their populations into cycles of destruction which leave in their wake devastated cities, displaced families, and generations scarred by war. Panama condemns the attacks launched from Lebanese territory against Israel by Hezbollah, which have forced communities to evacuate and seek shelter. These irresponsible actions are profoundly detrimental to the Lebanese civilian population and also to the refugee communities present in the country, because they have helped unleash a dangerous dynamic of escalation, which has led to an intense military response and to an even greater deterioration of the humanitarian situation. According to recent figures from the Lebanese authorities and humanitarian organizations, more than 700,000 people have been displaced within Lebanon in recent days, while almost 600 people have died. Among them, dozens of children, women, and humanitarian and rescue workers. Many of these families have sought refuge in schools and improvised shelters, which demonstrates the scale of the humanitarian crisis that is underway. Panama calls for the maximum restraint and the immediate cessation of hostilities. We urge the parties to fully comply with their obligations under international law, in particular international humanitarian law, and to adopt all necessary measures to protect the civilian population and infrastructure. Panama reiterates its support for the state and government of Lebanon, whose efforts to preserve internal stability and to strengthen the authority of the state throughout its territory are essential, including the role of the Lebanese armed forces in ensuring that the monopoly and control of arms lies exclusively with the state. We take note of the recent statements by the President of Lebanon, Joseph Aoun, reiterating his country's readiness to resume negotiations with Israel with the aim of stopping the current escalation, and also the measures announced by the Lebanese authorities to restrict the military activities of Hezbollah. We reaffirm our full recognition of the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of Lebanon in accordance with its internationally recognized borders. A safe and stable Lebanon, a secure and stable Lebanon with institutions that can fully exercise their authority through the actions that the current governmental administration of Lebanon have been carrying out is essential for the stability of the entire region. Mr. President, greater escalations of violence. That notwithstanding, in recent months, the presence of the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon has suffered repeated attacks, increasing the risks for personnel and its facilities. We robustly reject these attacks. Last week, 3 blue helmets from the Ghana contingent were wounded while they were within a mission position in the south of Lebanon. Attacks or actions that compromise the security and integrity of the personnel, facilities, and property of the United Nations are unacceptable. Blue helmets that are implementing the mandates of this council, as well as the positions and infrastructure of the mission, must be respected and protected at all times in accordance with international law. Panama reiterates its firm support and backing for the work of the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon. We must also recall that that force is in the final phase of its mandate before the planned withdrawal process. And it is precisely for that reason that it is even more important to preserve the conditions of stability on the ground, to ensure the freedom of movement of the mission, and to allow it to fully carry out the tasks entrusted to it by this Council. We reiterate the urgent appeal for the greatest restraint and the immediate cessation of hostilities. President, the current situation once again demonstrates the importance of the full implementation of and compliance with Resolution 1701 of the Security Council. This resolution continues to be the fundamental framework for guaranteeing stability along the blue line and for moving towards a lasting solution.
Country of remarkable diversity, shaped by layers of civilization and a rich cultural and historical legacy. Its people have long shown resilience in the face of adversity, preserving a vibrant social fabric rooted in coexistence among communities and traditions. Lebanon needs a period of calm to pursue its objectives of peace and stability. The renewed escalation and hostilities are a matter of great concern. They threaten far more than infrastructure. They endanger civilian life and risk reversing the fragile political and security progress Lebanon had begun to make preceding the current crisis. In this context, allow me to make 4 points. First, Pakistan reiterates its full support for the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Lebanon. We condemn in the strongest terms Israel's continued military aggression in southern Lebanon, which has resulted in the death of more than 400 civilians, including at least 83 children and 42 women, and over 600,000 people displaced. Sweeping illegal evacuation orders across large parts of southern Lebanon have deepened civilian suffering. The large-scale destruction of civilian infrastructure and the blatant disregard for international humanitarian law must cease immediately. Second, the use of force must remain the exclusive prerogative of the Lebanese state through its legitimate institutions. In this regard, the Lebanese armed forces play a central role, and Pakistan supports efforts to strengthen their capacity and operational effectiveness. Pakistan welcomes the efforts of the government of Lebanon to restore stability and strengthen state authority, including the cabinet decision of 2nd March to reinforce national security structures. We also note Lebanon's de-escalation initiatives, including the 4-point plan advanced by its leadership to restore calm and stability. Third, Pakistan strongly condemns attacks on UN peacekeepers serving with UNIFIL, who have been injured in Israeli strikes. Peacekeepers operating under the UN flag carry out a vital mandate authorized by the Council. Their safety and security must be guaranteed at all times. Fourth, Israeli military activities in southern Lebanon, including the continued presence of forces and the establishment of positions inside Lebanese territory, are illegal and unacceptable. These Israeli actions, which are in contravention of international law, are also undermining the efforts of the government of Lebanon to ensure peace and stability in the country. We call for Israel's immediate, full, and unconditional withdrawal from all occupied Lebanese territories. Sustainable calm requires the full implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701 and unwavering respect for Lebanon's sovereignty and territorial integrity along the Blue Line. Mr. President, we echo the Secretary General's deep concern regarding the regional military escalation since 28th February, which has gravely undermined the November 2024 cessation of hostilities agreement. The situation in Lebanon cannot be viewed in isolation from this broader escalation across the Middle East. Heightened confrontation and unjustified attacks on several brotherly countries, which Pakistan has condemned, have gravely aggravated regional security and stability. At this critical juncture, dialogue and diplomacy must prevail over confrontation. De-escalation, restraint, and renewed diplomatic engagement are urgently required to prevent further deterioration of the regional security environment. Only through sustained political dialogue and respect for international law can the region move towards stability and peace. To conclude, Mr. President, Pakistan stands firmly with the government and people of Lebanon. The international community must take urgent action to prevent further escalation, alleviate human suffering, and support Lebanon's efforts to restore peace and stability across its territory. I thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Mr. President, I thank the United States in their capacity as President of the Security Council for this month for organizing this meeting. I also thank Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Under-Secretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations, and Mr. Tom Fletcher, Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator. We also thank the briefer for her information. Mr. President, official reports and recent news show that the humanitarian situation in Lebanon is delicate. As at the 7th of March, more than 100,000 people were seeking shelter. Since the 2nd of March, almost 1 million people have been displaced within the country. Hundreds of thousands more have been affected by broad evacuation orders. A high number of civilian victims has been recorded.
I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3, namely the Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia, and my own country, Somalia. We thank USG DiCarlo, USG Lacroix, and USG Fletcher for their comprehensive briefings. We also thank Ms. Lynn Harfouch for her valuable contribution. We welcome the participation of the representative of Lebanon in today's meeting. The A3 views the escalation of hostilities in Lebanon since the beginning of March with the utmost gravity and concern. We are deeply alarmed by the mounting toll on human life and the destruction of civilian infrastructure, including densely populated residential areas. Furthermore, as reported by UNICEF, nearly 700,000 people, including 200,000 children, have been forced from their homes, adding to the tens of thousands already uprooted from previous attacks. In that regard, we call for the protection of civilians and full adherence to international humanitarian law and international human rights law. The A3 is also gravely concerned about the March 6th incident against the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, which resulted in injuries to 3 Ghanaian peacekeepers at their position in Al-Ghawza. This is a stark reminder of the perils faced by peacekeepers in Lebanon. The safety and security of United Nations personnel and property are not negotiable. They must be respected at all times and without exception. We wish a swift and complete recovery to all the injured peacekeepers. Mr. President, the A3 reaffirms its unwavering commitment to Lebanon's sovereignty, territorial integrity, unity, and political independence. Lebanon must not become a theater for proxy confrontations or unilateral territorial expansions. Respect for the blue line and the cessation of hostilities by all actors are essential for stability and the full implementation of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701. We acknowledge the critical role UNIFIL continues to play in maintaining stability along the blue line. Its presence remains a critical element for the collective efforts to achieving peace in Lebanon and contribute to de-escalation. At the same time, the A3 underscores the importance of enhancing the capacity of the Lebanese armed forces to assume full responsibility for the defense of Lebanese territory. We urge the international community to intensify its support, including equipment, materials, and financial assistance to ensure their effective and sustainable deployment south of the Litani River. To conclude, Mr. President, The A3 calls for an immediate cessation of hostilities and an urgent return to the parameters of the 2024 ceasefire agreement. We emphasize that a renewed commitment to Resolution 1701 remains the primary framework for long-term stability. It's imperative that all parties prioritize dialogue and diplomacy over kinetic action to prevent a full-scale regional conflagration. Achieving a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East is only viable through genuine commitment to diplomacy in accordance with international law and the UN Charter. We stand in solidarity with the people of Lebanon, and we urge this Council to act with unity and resolve to restore peace and uphold international law. I thank you.
Thank you to the representative of Somalia for the statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of the United States. I add my thanks and appreciation to all of our briefers today. Colleagues, the United States condemns the attacks that Hezbollah, a longtime proxy of the Iranian regime, has launched against Israel. Hezbollah has yet again made it clear that it does not represent nor does it defend the people.
We also condemn the attacks against the UNIFIL from any source. We renew our gratitude to the UNIFIL, to the troop contributing countries, and to all personnel serving within this force, especially those who lost their lives in Lebanon in service of international peace and security. We strongly condemn the targeting of the Ghanaian battalion headquarters and express full solidarity with Ghana and UNIFIL's command, wishing the injured a swift recovery. Finally, Mr. President, Lebanon is facing an extremely dangerous moment and a true humanitarian catastrophe. While we work tirelessly to alleviate the suffering of our people and meet their basic humanitarian needs, any support or assistance to help ease the burden of this crisis is welcome and greatly appreciated. We reiterate once again that Lebanon will not accept to be turned into an arena for settling scores. We will continue striving to lead our nation out of this ordeal stronger and more resilient. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of Lebanon for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I would like to congratulate the United States for taking the presidency for the month of March, and I also would like to thank the briefers. Mr. President, since the 2nd of March, Hezbollah has launched wave after wave of attacks against Israel. More than 880 rockets and missiles, more than 60 UAVs, more than 15 anti-tank guided missiles. Hezbollah itself has been clear about why, and I quote, to avenge the death of Ayatollah Khamenei, not to defend Lebanon, not to protect Lebanese citizens, but to serve the agenda of the Iranian regime. Just days ago, they vowed to fight to the last breath. As we sit here today, Israeli families are running to bomb shelters as Hezbollah launches new attacks toward our communities. That is the reality we face. That is why Israel is now operating in Lebanon, to stop this threat. Mr. President, to understand where we are today, we must look at what has happened since October 7th. For years, Hezbollah grew into one of the most powerful non-state armed organizations in the world. It began way back in the 80s, when Lebanon was in the middle of a civil war. But over time, it became something more dangerous, a proxy army built by Iran, funded by Iran, trained by Iran, armed by Iran. By 2024, Hezbollah had between 150,000 and 200,000 rockets and missiles. Think about that. The largest arsenal ever held by a non-state actor. Think about your countries. most of your countries do not have the capacity of 200 missiles and rockets. A war machine built over decades with one purpose: Israel's destruction. After Hamas's October 7th attacks, Hezbollah opened a second front from Lebanon. For months, Israel's northern communities came under fire. Rockets, drones, missiles launched across the border. We responded. Israel responded with targeted operations against Hezbollah's command networks and military infrastructure. I want to remind you that during that operation, senior leadership was eliminated, including their leader, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, a terrorist with blood on his hands. Command structures were disrupted. Around 3,000 fighters from the Radwan force were taken off the battlefield. They lost roughly 80% of its rockets' capability. The army Iran spent decades building, we broke it. But Hezbollah was not fully eliminated. We have to admit it. Instead of stepping back after the ceasefire, it rearmed, restocked, it rebuilt, and it did so with the help of the Iranian regime. During the first year after the ceasefire, Iran funneled more than $1 billion to Hezbollah. It continues to receive over $50 million every month to rebuild its military machine. Tehran funds it, Tehran arms it, Tehran directs it. Hezbollah pulls the trigger, but the Ayatollahs in Tehran pull the strings. All of this in direct violation of Security Council Resolution 1701. Mr. President, that resolution required the area between the Blue Line and the Litani River to be free of Hezbollah weapons and terrorists. You all voted on this resolution. I want to show you this map, which shows launch sites used by Hezbollah to fire rockets, missiles, and drones toward Israel. You know, look where they are. All those dots are south of the Litani River. Hezbollah should not be there. And from these locations, on the first day of these attacks, Hezbollah launched missiles toward Israel. You know, one of the village here, the village of Bargoz, small village. We have the intel about it. When they send a missile from those areas, southern of the Litani, it takes 30 seconds for the missile to land in Israel, in the northern part of Israel. 30 seconds. Imagine for a minute that you are driving with your family in your car, and you hear the sirens, and you have 30 seconds. You have to stop the car, you have to look for a shelter, and you have to decide which child you take first to the shelter if you cannot carry all of them. 30 seconds, that's what it takes. Mr. President, since the ceasefire came into effect, Israel has submitted 929 enforcement requests asking the Lebanese armed forces to dismantle Hezbollah infrastructure, launch sites, weapons depots, underground bunkers. However, the efforts of the Lebanese armed forces were not sufficient. Sites that were identified were not dismantled. Sometimes they came there, they took the pictures, and that was it. And today Hezbollah continues to fire rockets at Israel from those same areas. Last August, the Lebanese government instructed its military to prepare a plan to disarm armed militias in the country. We welcomed that decision. It was a momentous step. We also commend the recent statements of Prime Minister Salam declaring Hezbollah's current military activity against Israel illegal. Those are the right words, but the reality on the ground tells a different story. So I ask the Lebanese government, if Hezbollah is being dismantled, where is the evidence? Where are the operations against their launch sites? Where are the seizures of their weapons? Where is your military? Ambassador Arafa, Lebanon now stands at a pivotal moment in its history. The time has come to decide. Will Lebanon stick to declarations or actually act. Because the question before you is very simple. Who controls Lebanon? The Lebanese government or Hezbollah, acting on behalf of the Ayatollahs in Tehran? Lebanon has a national army of more than 72,000 soldiers. Mobilize them, train them, empower them with the authority and resources to assert the sovereignty of the Lebanese state. We support peaceful negotiations. You know that. We spoke before the last operation. But today, as we speak, there are only two options on the table. Either the Lebanese government takes real action to restrain Hezbollah, or Israel will use its strength to dismantle this terrorist organization. There are no other options. You know, we can meet and talk in Akora, wherever you want, but not while Hezbollah is sending missiles into Israel. So Israel is acting. In recent days, the IDF has struck Hezbollah command centers and military infrastructure across southern Lebanon. The IDF has also carried out strikes against assets of Al-Qard al-Qassam network, Hezbollah's financial system used to fund its terrorist activity and rebuild its military capabilities. We have issued evacuation notices to protect Lebanese civilians because we face an enemy that deliberately places them in harm's way. Hezbollah hides behind civilians in Lebanon and firing at civilians in Israel. Mr. President, believe me, Israel does not want to be operating inside Lebanon. But Israel will not accept rockets fired at our people. As we speak, the Iranian regime is losing. And like many failing regimes, it is lashing out at its neighbors across the region, indiscriminately attacking civilians. You will meet at 3 p.m. to discuss that. And its proxy Hezbollah is doing exactly the same to Israel. Many countries in our region have drawn the right conclusion. They are distancing themselves from Tehran, strengthening their defenses, protecting their sovereignty. Lebanon now faces that same choice. Israel will continue confronting the terror network built by Tehran, and we will do whatever is necessary to ensure that rockets and terror can no longer threaten our people. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative for Israel for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank you for holding this important meeting. We also thank the Permanent Mission of France for its request to hold this emergency meeting alongside other countries. I would also like to thank briefers. The Syrian Arab Republic is concerned by the dangerous escalation in the region with its grave political, security, and economic repercussions, including on the brotherly country of Lebanon, its people, and its infrastructure. Syria reaffirms its support to the safety and security of Lebanon. We denounce the escalation and the bombing of Lebanon, as it will hinder the role of the Lebanese state to implement its functions and responsibilities, including its efforts to disarm Hezbollah. We also warn of the repercussions of the current conflict, which, if it continues, could expand in a way that contradicts the interest of Lebanon and the region, especially as this conflict coincides with repeated Israeli violations of Syria's sovereignty through aerial violations and ground incursion into Syria's territory and the occupation of new territory since the 8th of December 2020. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun to discuss the current regional developments and their repercussions on the security and stability of the region. Both sides stressed the importance of maintaining the security and safety of both countries. President al-Shara expressed his support to the efforts of President Aoun to disarm Hezbollah and to spare the region the repercussions of the current conflict. Both sides reaffirmed the importance of coordination and cooperation between Syria and Lebanon to maintain the security and safety of both countries and their people, and to prevent any attempts to sow discord and destabilize the region. President al-Shara expressed his support to serious steps taken by the governments of Iraq and Lebanon to protect their countries and prevent any descent towards